Today on Yester Kitchen, we're going to go back to the Depression and talk about a dish that was very, very popular with many, many families. You're going to love it. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Jill and this is Yester Kitchen. If you're new here, welcome. It would be an honor to have you join us as we explore retro history through food. And today we are going back to the Depression. We did it once, and Kelly D, thank you so much for your request, requested a dish. I'm not exactly gonna make her request, but I'm gonna make a very, very popular dish with the same ingredients. So Kelly asked if I can do a dish of mashed potato stuffed hot dogs from the Depression. So that was a dish. I'll just tell you really cheap. You take a hot dog, you make some mashed potatoes, you split it, put the mashed potatoes inside, and if you could afford it, because this is Depression era cooking, you put a little cheese on top. And that is the dish. But there is one that was just so much more popular. Just to recap, the Depression covered 1929 to 1939. It was really, really tough times for America. People didn't have money, they couldn't buy ingredients, and the American housewife came through, and she created so many dishes. With all the lack and limitation around her, she was able to create delicious dishes for her family. Hot dogs was one of the biggest proteins of the day. I know, hot dogs, but they turned hot dogs into many, many wonderful things. And today we're gonna make something called Poorman's meal. What? I know, you're like, wait Jill, we already did that. We did, and it's right there. So that Poorman's meal was one specific family recipe that was sent to me, and it was glorious, and I go over so much more Depression history there, so check that one out after. But the term Poorman's meal there really was no specific, okay, this is where it started. There's no specific history on that name. Poorman's meal was really just a catch-all of any dish that someone can put together with what they had, and that was their Poorman's meal. There are hundreds of versions of Poorman's meals out there, but the most popular one involves hot dogs, involves potatoes, and involves onions, and it's actually really, really good. Now, if you're eating this every single night because all you can afford are hot dogs and potatoes, that might get boring, but try it, because you can just make this. I'm going to show you. I'm going to start right now, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Depression. So I have a very large pan, and in it, I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of oil. Besides the 2 tablespoons I just told you about, there are no measurements, because really, you made meals out of what you had. So the components are potatoes, onions, hot dogs. I'm going to tell you what I've used, and you can use whatever you like. It's just that simple, because these dishes had to be versatile, because they had to be whatever you could make. So here I have about 3/4 of an onion, just diced up. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be little. It just needs to be cut up. So we're gonna get those going. I have them covered up with a wet paper towel so they don't really start to oxidize, except it looks like they have a little bit, but that's okay. Because Depression, you cooked with it no matter what. So I have here 2 russet potatoes that I've cubed up, and they're gonna go right in there as well. And yeah, the reason they're a little reddish color is because some air snuck in and my potatoes started to oxidize. But they're very, very edible. Back in the Depression, if you had potatoes, with the blacks or the greens, you wouldn't throw them out. You would cut away that piece and use the remainder. There was no waste in the Depression. As a matter of fact, now you know how much we're about childhood memories, right? So kids of the Depression grew up to be very frugal adults. It's just whatever you experience as a child, you carry with you for life, right? I mean, we know that, right? We talk about childhood memories through food all the time. You can tell the Depression kids, as time went by, because they just did not want to waste anything. We're just going to keep stirring this. I've got this on about a medium-high heat, and this is probably going to go for a while, because we need to have all our potatoes and all our onions cooked. And actually, potatoes and onions are a lovely combination. So you used to be able to buy potatoes for like $1 a sack, and that would be your filler. Fillers were everything in the Depression. Very, very common fillers: potatoes, rice, pasta, beans, lentils, Anything that can fill up, because meat was very expensive. You didn't get to have it very often, which is why I said hot dogs were very, very popular, because they were a source of protein. And you can give them, many, many different variations. Another meat that was popular during the Depression was Spam. You know Spam, don't you? Well, I have a whole video celebrating Spam, but I will tell you that Spam did not come around until 1937. So it's when it came on the scene, it became very popular because it was inexpensive and it was good and it was protein. But the Depression only lasted till 1939, so it only rode the last 2 years of it, but I bet it was a wonderful change from hot dogs by the time Spam came around. I'm using a nonstick pan, which they didn't have back then, so of course I'm not gonna need the extra oil because I'm gonna be nice and non-sticky. But if you do need more oil, as you can see, if you're cooking, feel free to add it. Like I said, there are no measurements in this dish. It is whatever you have and whatever you want. Now, there was also another dish from the Depression called Hoover stew. It was named after President Hoover because he was presiding over the country during the Depression. And that usually consisted of hot dogs, pasta, a can of tomatoes, and a can of corn. And that was Hoover stew. So, see, hot dogs, they were very, very versatile. And the modern housewife of the time learned how to make all kinds of dishes so her family didn't have to eat the same thing every single night. And of course, all kinds of food manufacturers came along and made cookbooks to say, hey, here's how you can make more with less. I love requests, so thank you, Kelly, so much for requesting kind of this. I hope you forgive me, but this one's awesome. I know, Susan B., you're out there, and I know you requested a Depression-era dish that was meatless. I've got you covered, and if anyone else has requests, bring them. I will tell you 2 things. My request list is actually crazy long, which I love, so please keep them coming. And I also film way in advance. So please be patient. If you give me a request, if I can do it, I absolutely will. So because your potatoes and onions are raw, they're gonna take some time. So we're gonna let this cook and do its little happy little cooking thing, going on. And I will come back when the potatoes are browned and the onions are translucent, and then we have some hot dogs to add. See you in a few. So it's been about 15, 20 minutes. Take a look. See, our potatoes are nice and browned now, and our onions are all cooked in. This is what you want. You want soft potatoes. How do you know if they're soft? Taste them. And of course, we're gonna need salt and pepper. And as I say, you always want to fresh grind your pepper because it just tastes better. You don't know how long that pre-ground stuff has been sitting on the shelves. So this way you just have a nice pop of flavor. I'm putting, maybe about a half a teaspoon of pepper and maybe 1 teaspoon of salt. Check your seasonings. How do you do that? You taste them. Oh, and before you potato people come at me, yes, I know submerging potatoes in water will also help prevent them from browning while they're raw, but I was too lazy and I used the wet paper towel method, which usually works for me. Okay, so now we have our potatoes and our onions, so let's talk hot dogs. I have in my happy little bowl 4 hot dogs, and check it out. When you're cooking Depression, you need this protein to go around, so we cut them very thin. Why did I use 4 hot dogs? It's what I had. See, right, goes back to make what you have. I had 3/4 of an onion, I had 2 potatoes, dinner is done. So all you want to do is put your hot dogs in, and hot dogs are pretty much cooked. So you just really want to let them go for just a couple minutes till it's warmed through. You have yourself one very popular version of poor man's meal. But I think it's really important to go back and eat from the past, because it gives you an idea of the times, the culture, what people were going through, and really you can see when people were faced with adversity, they can get pretty creative. Another meat that was really popular in the Depression was dried beef. It was actually thin, paper thin slices of beef that were air dried. And a lot of times what a housewife would do is they would make a cream sauce, put the beef in it, served it on toast. And that, yes, my friends, is cream chip beef on toast, straight out of the Depression, but that's for another day, maybe. Like I said, I have my long list of requests, and I also have so many dishes that I found that I want to share. So we'll get there. I'm not going anywhere. Okay, I think our hot dogs are pretty warm through by now. And it actually smells pretty good in here, and this is actually pretty good. Don't go, try it. Experience the pass through food. It's so important. All right, let's just turn that off. And I am just gonna serve up a little bit. And it's warm, it's comforting, it's filling, and it is very inexpensive to make. It's good. It really is. But you've got a tiny bit of the smokiness from the hot dogs. The potatoes are fried, the onions make it. You got the salt and the pepper, that's gonna give you a little bit of seasoning. Try it. I would love to hear what you think. So thanks for hanging out with me so we can discover Poor Man's Meal, version 2. If you would like to explore more dishes from your childhood or just the past, I invite you to subscribe. I release new videos every week. In the meantime, there's some more retro dishes for you. And remember, every dish, even Poor Man's Meal, no matter how you make it, is wonderful and has a story. I'll see you in the next video.